Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Philosophy of Now, all you gypsies, nomads, genuine misfits, and dissidents of the psychopathic control grid. Let me welcome you to the show number 16, believe it or not. My name is Thomas Sheridan. My website is www.thomassheridanarts.com, and if you can support me any way there, you can. It'd be great. Buy a book, read an article, share an article, and try and make sense of this increasingly strange world we live in as we are on the cusp of change and it's all happening before us. The walls are dissolving and now it's like which is the mirage, which is the puppet, which is the shadow, who is the puppet master? Do we know who it is? No, but every so often we do get hints. Now, I've got a packed show tonight, so I'll get right into it. Before I start, the first song I heard there tonight was a very old Thin Lizzy song called Era, which is a beautifully blues song. And that was, I think it was from about 1973. And then after I exercised Russell Brand off the program, you heard Jailbreak. And all the music tonight is going to be Thin Lizzy because tonight we're going to concentrate on what has real value in this world, what has real worth. What is not ephemeral fluff that has been given to us by the psychopathic magi at the top of the pyramid, saying, here's your gods, here's your salvation, here's your solutions. We're not going to do that tonight. We're going to celebrate Thin Lizzy because to me they represent everything that's good in the world. And Phil Lynott was he was a complicated man, but he was a man. And he may have had a short life, but what beautiful music he gave the world. So tonight's show is a little bit historic because, as you know, well, some of you have known, the past week for me personally was a very bizarre one. After the Russell Brand appearance on Nightlife, that's a Thin Lizzy album actually, Newsnight with that fucking Jeremy Paxman character. I wrote an article from a blog, thinking nothing about it, and the next thing I was like Ronnie Biggs or something. I was public enemy number one, and the comments I got attacking me were unbelievable, and I didn't expect it. And the article within 2 days had something like 15,000 reads, and I was like, well, what the hell is going on here? I mean, I'm just voicing an opinion of something I thought was pretty obvious. The guy is just a comedian. He's not really asking for anything special. And it was just a cheap soundbite on the BBC, blah, blah, blah. That's the end of it. But then I got contacted by Red Ice, and I think myself and Henrik on Red Ice, if you haven't heard it yet, it was a pretty historic interview, I think. It was pretty amazing, actually. It was one of the best interviews I've done, and I mean, all the interviews I've done have all been great in their own kind of way. I don't mean from mine, but I mean, I've got now through the hosts, with one or two exceptions, what I was trying to convey. But I think myself and Henrik were both frustrated about what was going on that last week, that it was almost like a therapy session for the actual. So what you heard was a live therapy session of two guys trying to make sense of something they couldn't really fully understand. And it's got overwhelmingly positive, reviews. The interview. If you haven't seen the redicecreations.com and have a listen. It's exactly how we were talking off there. So what you heard was an honest, unbiased opinion of how we felt, and I think it came across in that manner. Again, I have nothing against Russell Brand as a human being. I just don't think he's a very talented performer. He's certainly not worth his £15 million in the bank when we have vast numbers of other actors who can really act in comics who are really funny, and people who have really genuine political opinions, and they don't get nothing. So again, what is this all about? What are we dealing with here? What's going on? Well, it's amazing. It actually is amazing. In the last book I wrote, The Amble of the Psyche, I spoke about regicide, where someone has made a mock king and then they're destroyed. But sometimes kingdoms do rise and kingdoms do fall, and kingdoms are destroyed. and societies are destroyed, and they're regurgitated, and they're ripped apart, and values are changed, and people are changed by the change agents. And that's exactly what's happening in the UK at the moment. The UK as a nation is being murdered. Now let me get that back again so you hear me quite clearly. If you are citizens of the United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, you are in a society that is being murdered, particularly the ones in England. Scotland might have a different path, but looking like they're going to be, quote unquote, independent, so they can become just another vassal state of the EU like Ireland does. But it's really about England more than anything else, and possibly Wales as well. Now, how do you murder a society? Well, all you have to do is look at history, okay? Look what happened to the original English, the Anglo-Saxons and the Angles, when the Normans arrived. They completely rewrote the model of what it was to be English and gave you an Anglo-Norman reconstruction. And then it happened again under William of Orange when the Hanoverians came over. And it's happened many countries. Now, England, Britain became a great empire for many centuries, but that's long over now. But yet you still have an enormous power base there in the royal family. Plans are being rolled out. Changes are being made. Everything you know you're being told is wrong. And as amazing as it sounds, small things in the scheme of things say so much. You can draw lines between stories that don't seem to be connected. The Madeleine McCann disappearance. People are wringing their hands and saying, excuse me, people are wringing their hands and saying things like, well, how come the two people who should be the most obvious suspects are the ones who are controlling the investigation? This is part of the murder of British society. Crazy making, gaslighting. Gaslighting is when they take reality, they turn it upside down. They tell you black is white, white is black, and eventually you just throw your hands in the air and say, feck it, I can't deal with it anymore. And that's what that case is. The coppers who are looking after that case are the two fixers who framed Barry George with the murder of Jill Dando, a man who spent 9 years in prison, and the same dregs of British media, the same excremental editorial departments of the tabloids and the broadsheets who stitched that man up as a psycho killer when he's completely innocent, are the same ones who are portraying the McCanns as God's gift to parenting. Jill Dando was murdered because she was pulling the lid open. She was probably a decent journalist, or she probably wasn't a decent journalist, but she made the mistake of finding out too much about the Jimmy Savile connection and how deep that monster's pathology actually went, even further, much, much further than being just a industrial level pedophile, much further. And what happens there? It's all tied up. But kingdoms rise and kingdoms fall, but regents and monarchs don't pass. And the system is being created in such a way that when Russell Brand demands a social and egalitarian republic, and all the people cheer, oh, Russ, he's our hero, he will save the day, and he's so sexy, even though he talks like this, he's like Frank Spencer, he's as sexy as Frank Spencer. You're being gaslighted, folks. You're having your minds messed with. Now, what's this really about in a political sense? Well, I'll tell you what the purple pill is. If it's on with the purple pill, look at the article on my website. The purple pill is the road of banality that you are sent on, the wild goose chase that's not that wild, while the change agents continue on their way. They're looking to create a third party in Britain. That's really what's happening here. Because the two main parties are identical to each other, the Tories and Labour, particularly the New Labour, that rose with, Tony Blair, that mass murdering psychopath. The traditional left needs a new flagship, and it's coming. That's what this is all about. They have it all planned, folks. They have it all planned for you. This is not something that happens by chance or in the spur of the moment. Because what we're dealing with is scientists, a scientific system, a very, very scientific system that monitors you, makes plans, measures, quantifies, adjusts, and so forth. It makes adjustments in how they treat you, me, and everyone else out there, the lab rats. And that's what's going on here, folks. This is the political aspect of the Russell Brand Messiah Tour. To create a third party in Britain, which will be definitely left in orientation, a Fabian socialist party. It'll probably be led by someone who is either a political outsider, Tony Benn is much too old at this point, or somebody who has built up a name for himself, either through entertainment, but has held leftist views, or has built up a big business, but is still a working man or one of the people or a working woman, that kind of thing. Someone like a Billy Bragg, I could see that happening. In fact, my spidey senses have sniffed Billy Bragg's voice here and there all around this. So he might be getting set up for something there, or some big business person. And also, I think the BBC will probably be dissolved or demolished. This is the Savile thing. I think the BBC will be replaced by some other news service that will have some kind of ridiculous name like, Intoxicatia or something like that. And they'll do what they did with British Rail. They'll sell shares in it like they did with Network Rail. And that way they will able to make the transition as easy as possible. So Britain is being demolished, folks. It's being recycled, regurgitated, and rebuilt. And everything from personal social identities, even to a spiritual, which we'll be talking about in a little while, state is being remade in a new image of what Britain is in the future. It won't be cool Britannia. It'll be fool Britannia, because you'll be fooled. You will be fooled into accepting this. Not all of you, but some of you will, unfortunately, because you'll be made and put into a situation where I'm paying so much taxes. There's no peace. Life seems hard. There's no satisfaction in this life. And you'll be looking for something new. And you'll be talking to my English friends. What they tell me is they say the same things that was what the 70s felt like. The 70s under socialism in the UK and here in Ireland was a crap time. Nobody really had any money. Everything you made, no matter how much you made, if you were poor or middle class, just seemed to be enough to survive, but nothing extra. And it seems to be going that way again. I have a caller on. I'll get to that caller in a few minutes if he's still there, Steve. And these are important things, folks, because we deserve better than this, because we're all human beings on the same planet, and I don't like to see any people in any country suffer. And I don't have any grudge against the English. I'm not one of these Sinn Féin gobshites here that, like, if their girlfriend leaves them, they blame it on British rule. I'm not like that at all. I want to see my friends in Britain as happy as they should be, and all people in all countries as happy as they should be. But I don't like seeing people being fooled. And that's what's happening with the Russell Brand thing, the purple pill. Now, Paxman came out on the Graham Norton show. Now, Graham Norton would not be famous either. You know what Graham Norton's destiny in life was? The kid at the back of the class who made stupid jokes. That's what he was. And that's how he got to be famous. So everything's mediocre and crap. Steve, do you want to put that caller on now? We'll see if we have a caller. It's been a long time since we had a caller. Hello, caller, are you there?
Hello?
Hello, caller. How are you doing?
Hi. Well, I was just wondering, I had a question about, you mentioned capitalism and how you support it.
Yeah. I don't support capitalism. It's like, if you're given a choice between your shit sandwich having either mayonnaise or mustard, I'm just picking mayonnaise because I like it more than mustard right now, but it's still a shit sandwich. The capitalist system that we have today is absolutely revolting and disgusting and appalling. It's run by psychopathic banksters who really, I mean, I'm against the death penalty, but if there are people on this earth that really should be put up a wall, really should be deported and put in gulags, it would be them. The problem with capitalism today is, my friend, is that it would be okay if they took the usury, the Federal Reserve, the interest rates, and the reserve and the fiat currency and fractional lending out of it. Capitalism, if it was left alone as just free trade, it would probably be the best situation we could manage at the moment. The problem is that right now the whole thing is rigged. It's really rigged against us. But it's not that I prefer capitalism. It's just it's my poison of choice at the moment. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, because what you're talking about is old capitalism. That's not something that's going on right now. That's like
absolutely, yeah.
And Ubuntu is something of the future that I think we could talk about. That's a solution, not capitalism.
Yeah, well, I'm open for anything at this point, but we also have to be careful that anything that develops that comes from the grassroots, not some kind of great big global plan, and that's something I feel strongly about. I think what we need is some kind of indigenous commerce. When I say that, I mean something that truly developed from the ground up and works so well it appeals to other people.
Yeah, local. Support local and not global. I hear that, but we need some kind of flash of local movement. How do we what kind of solution do we have for that?
Well, that's we just keep saying it. Use your local shops. Like I was talking to somebody today even about things like charity. If people in your neighborhood are sick or old or handicapped, you don't give money to a big corporate charity. You go and ask them, do they need something from the shops? You shop locally. I'll give you an example this week of something I'd done like that. I needed to get some wood to build some shelving, right? And I went to a big chain here, Homebase, which are a big kind of, DIY chain. And the service was absolutely a joke. The Lithuanian guy, who was a nice guy, I couldn't have a conversation with him. It was very expensive. And then when I asked him, could he cut the wood into certain lengths so I could fit it into the car, he could. I'm not allowed to do that because I could injure myself. We're not allowed to have saws. And then I said, screw it. And then I went to an old-fashioned Irish builder's merchant, guy who lives down an alleyway, and he got the timber out. It was cheaper, and he cut it for me there on the spot. And so that was a lesson in my life right there and then. I am never, ever going to go back to big businesses if I can help it. I wish we could have small everything. That's why I'm on this radio station. I'm not on a big network. I really do believe, like yourself, that small is beautiful and local is logical. And that's what they don't want. They want a big, huge, centralized system. And that's what this egalitarian socialism is about. It's a big, huge, gigantic, scientific, socialized system. And it's not for locals.
Well, maybe I can just encourage you then to change your wording a little bit. Maybe we want local capitalism or something like that.
Yeah, well, I was quite specific in that Red Ice interview. I said the current version of capitalism is horrible, but I'd still rather be a battery hen. Sorry, rather be a free-range hen than a battery hen at this point in time if I can't be a free bird. And that's how I just feel about it. I can change it in a moment, but I do. I'm glad you called me, and thank you for expressing your concerns on that so I could clear that up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Good night, buddy. Okay, thank you for that, Steve. Now, I want to talk about something else here, about this regurgitation of the UK and things like that, and how roles are changed, and people's ideas are changed. It's been going on everywhere, and I found, you always come back to the same sneaky little systems and the same people behind it. And Paul Vickers of the Unpenned show today posted an absolute beauty of a story from the BBC from October 17, 2006. And I'm going to read this to you, and it's going to make it so clear to you how dangerous Fabianism is and how dangerous these people who are publishing the New Statesman and giving Russell Brand his orders are. This is from the BBC, and it says, human species may split in two. Humanity may split into two subspecies in 100,000 years' time, as predicted by H.G. Wells, an expert said. Now, this is interesting. H.G. Wells was a Fabian. H.G. Wells invented science fiction in order to future-proof people's behaviors so they would acquiesce with any changes in society. The idea was to write something that would come and then they would actually accept it because it was, oh, look, it happened. And that's been going on in science fiction for years. And H.G. Wells wrote Things to Come, which was made into a very interesting film. You should watch it. That was filmed back in the 1930s. And the film had an enormous budget. You know, at a time when British cinema didn't have Hollywood budgets, they made this thing had an enormous Hollywood-level budget, paid for by these multi-millionaire socialists to future-proof British society. And they spoke about something called wings over the world. And it was a Freemasonry of the air. And if any nation did not acquiesce to the control system, to wings over the world, they would be given the gas of peace, which was sprayed by aircraft. Look up, folks. Humanity may split into two subspecies in 100,000 years' time, as predicted by H.G. Wells, an expert has said. Evolutionary theorist Oliver Curry of, here we go, the London School of Economics. Now, what is the London School of Economics, which is supposed to concern itself with finance? Why are they so interested in evolutionary theory? Well, because it's the same thing, folks. Expects a genetic upper class, here we go, and a dim-witted underclass to emerge. And they have like a really offensive picture of like the new man who looks kind of like an androgynous kind of, well, you put a beard on him, he'd look a bit like Russell Brand, actually. And it says the human race would peak in the year 3000, he said. I mean, this is that whole, you know, population rubbish, before a decline due to dependence on technology. People would become choosier about their sexual partners, causing humanity to divide into subspecies. So this is the same thing as what Hitler was, you know, talked about. The descendants of the genetic upper class, it's back to eugenics again. The descendants of the genetic upper class, just listen to how they're saying these, listen to these languages, genetic upper class, would be tall, slim, healthy, attractive, intelligent, and creative, and a far cry from the underclass humans who would have evolved into dim-witted, ugly, squat, goblin-like creatures. Listen to the language this fucking lunatic is using, okay? Race ironed out, but in the near future, humans will evolve in 1,000 years' time into giants, between 6 foot and 7 foot tall, he predicts, while lifespans will have extended to 120 years. We have to wait 1,000 years for that. If they didn't spray us with all the chemicals and everything, we'd be living to 120 right now. Physical appearance, driven by indicators of health, youth, and fertility, will improve, he says, while men will exhibit symmetrical facial features, look athletic, and have squarer jaws, deeper voices, and bigger penises. Woo! Women, on the other hand, this doesn't sound good, will develop lighter, smooth, hairless skin, large, clear eyes, pert breasts, glossy hair, and even features, he said. Racial differences will be ironed out by interbreeding, producing a uniform race of coffee-colored people. Do you see how insane these fuckers are? How mentally ill they are? This is like what Hitler was talking about. And yeah, this guy, here's the London School of Economics. These are the people who are currently running Western society. However, Dr. Curry warns, in 10,000 years' time, humans may have paid a genetic price for relying on technology. Spoiled by gadgets designed to meet their every need, they could come to resemble domesticated animals. You see the whole Russell Brand, Bertram Russell Brand thingy coming in here. You see this, Bertrand Russell, the whole language, it never changes. These fellas are predicting 10,000 years in the future, but they're deeply entrenched within the Victorian mindset of the London School of Economics. The Victorian, Fabian, upper class, Huxley, Russell mindset. Receding chins. Social skills such as communicating and interacting with others could be lost. along with, wait for this one, folks, remember this. Now, what were you people saying about Russell Brand? He's developing an evolution of consciousness, all about love. And this guy says, this will be lost. Emotions such as love, sympathy, trust, and respect. So basically, this is a psychopathic mindset. I'm not saying this guy's a psychopathic, but he's definitely been made a proto-psychopath by his indoctrination in the London School of Economics. Is projecting psychopathic mindset upon the rest of society. He said it right here clearly. Social skills such as communicating and interacting with others could be lost, along with emotions such as love, sympathy, trust, and respect. That's because they want to remove these things so they can actually get back to killing handicapped people. And killing these grunt-like goblin people that he's predicted to come about. And if we have no emotions and are Aryan super gods, with coffee-colored skin. I wouldn't mind coffee-colored skin, actually. I'm like the pinkest Paddy you ever saw in your life. I wouldn't mind that. So they will have no feelings when the time comes for the great cleansing. And even though he talks about 10,000 years, he knows this is coming in like 40 years or 50 years. Physically, they would start to appear more juvenile. You see, this is interesting because this is whole infantilization thing. Like they're like little children, like Russell Brand's jokes. It's a baby Gandalf, like a little child, like a childlike humor. Chins would recede as a result of having to chew less on processed foods. Well, that's because they'll be sucking on all that GMO slop, slop that they'll give us, the gruel, the technocratic. There could also be health, and there'll also be no brain in there anyway, because they've completely got us all saturated fats by then. There could also be health problems caused by reliance on medicine, resulting in weak immune systems. Well, they're the ones who gave us all the antibiotics. Preventative deaths could also help to preserve the genetic defects that cause cancer. Preventing deaths could also help to preserve the genetic defects that cause cancer. Oh, so they're calling to kill people here. Interesting. So if people live, it'll make cancer spread. Further into the future, sexual selection, being choosy about one's partner, was likely to create a more and more genetic inequality, said Dr. Curry. The logical outcome would be two subspecies, gracile and robust. I mean, I feel like I'm reading from a menu here. Humans similar to the Eloi and the Morlocks, foretold by H.G. Wells in his 1895 novel The Time Machine. The London School of Economics is following a mandate, a platform, a working framework directly planned according to something that was developed in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So that way, when they get around to killing the goblin-like, genetically inferior humans, it can be just like George Bernard Shaw saying that we'd have humane murders. Madam, sir, can you justify your existence? The logical outcome, while science and technology have a potential to create an ideal habitat for humanity over the next millennium, there is a possibility of monumental genetic hangover over the subsequent millennia due to over-reliance on technology, reducing our natural capacity to resist disease, or our evolved ability to get along with each other, said Dr. Curry. He carried out the report for the men's satellite TV channel, Bravo. So, that's the phenomenal story that Paul Vickers found today, because that was perfectly ties in and shows and demonstrates the lunatics that were running the show and are still running the show. They're working to a plan that was developed by Victorian aristocrats who have a complete dislike of inferior people, a hatred of poor people, and that's what the goblins really are in this story. They're the poor people. They're the ones who don't join the Socialist Party and write folk songs about how noble it is to be poor. It's really nasty stuff, and this is what's called a reveal. Every so often, a story will pop out. And, Alan Watt has talked about this, and he says you'll get their whole story right in front of you. They'll let it rip now and again. And that's an example of them letting it rip. It really is very, very, very sinister stuff. Now you have, here we have now, right? We have a political system that's been deliberately crashed. The creation of a third left-wing party to replace New Labour. But New Labour probably merged with it. I wouldn't be surprised if its first government was there's a coalition between Labour and this new traditional socialist Fabian party they're inventing, that the political scientists are inventing at the London School of Economics, and then testing through their activists at the Cambridge, Durham and Bristol universities. And this stuff goes on, folks. This stuff is not a joke. This is what they're doing with things like the Madame Lacan story. People are saying, why are they so obviously insulting our intelligence by, now they're saying that the guy who did it committed suicide or he died of a crack overdose. And it's like, they take 5 years to tell us, but they also show you pictures of the suspects, and it's all a big farce. And they're laughing at you, folks. They're laughing at you. They think it's a big joke because they live in a world where they can get away with anything. And if you don't believe that, you look at Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile was a paedophile fixer for the British establishment, and that's why I believe a lot of these BBC presenters from that period are actually being arrested and falsely charged because they saw things. They witnessed things. They saw Jimmy Savile delivering young boys to Ted Heath's boat, and those boys never came back. That's what they saw. And that's why that limo driver was first stitched up with a fake sex thing. And he probably said to his lawyer, I'm going to go into court and I'm going to spill the beans to try and save myself. And the next thing you know, he does a Dr. Kelly and he commits suicide. It's so dark, folks. It's so unbelievably dark that to actually bring it all down to a comedian and a bad actor saving your ass just shows you how out of touch you are with the realities of what this world is like, because it's a childlike. You know what it is, folks? It's like there's people who can't live in the real world, and they collect model soldiers, or they build a model train layout. I'm not saying this people are hobbyists, they're all like this, but it's almost like they create a little world like sea monkeys or an ant farm or something, or hamsters in a happy trail, because they can't deal with the realities of what's going on. And that was the same case with the Russell Brand thing. It was like a fantasy world that's created that I don't have to deal with the real one. Russell Brand Revolution is going to save me because he's been on the BBC, and then his spirituality is going to save me. This is the one. I made a video about this last night on YouTube, and now can't people put one and one together? Okay, if Russell Brand is going on a personal exploration or a personal change in his life, you don't do it in full view of the public. You don't. You don't do it in full view of the public. These are personal things. It's being done publicly. It's being done publicly, so you'll think it's for you too. Not you two, the band. I mean you as a person. That you have to agree with this. And this, Russell Brand's version of spirituality that he's pushing. Now, we have to remember, this is not Russell Brand. This is the London School of Economics and its handlers in the Fabians, possibly his new girlfriend in the New Statesman, giving him all these instructions. Because that's a lot of times he looks like he's reading a script on this stuff. And you wonder why he's doing it, if he's in a lot of trouble or something. But it's a very strange world celebrities live in. All you have to do is look at his marriage to Katy Perry to see that. That's his private life. I don't like to get into it, but that video of him flashing that obey sign at that award show, it's undeniable. It's not even a joke. What the hell is that about? I mean, what? And then she changes her personality instantaneously to sort of like hold on to him. When people see these things and they don't want to accept it. They don't want to accept that Jimmy Savile could be much worse than a paedophile. And then they'll say, something must be done. And then you can see that photograph of Jim. Here's another one. You David Icke fans need to take a very close look at the photograph of David Icke and Russell Brand together. David Icke has his arm around Russell Brand the same way someone who met their famous footballer did. And David Icke sincerely is glad that he seems sincerely glad he's met this guy, but the look on Russell Brand's face is not reciprocal of David Icke's affection towards him. Russell Brand has been told to indulge David Icke and his followers. That's what he's been told to do. And he had him on his TV show, what was called on FX. And I watched that show. It was with your man from Noel Gallagher from Oasis. And you look at the show, watch that show carefully again. It's very interesting. David Icke is, on the surface, is seemingly treated with respect. But there's one point, when I first saw the show, and I said, oh, Russell Brand is actually saying the truth then. He says, they start talking about the reptilians, and Noel Gallagher gets up to walk away, which I found very rude, actually. Even if you don't, on a TV show, you don't do something like that. I don't know if it's a joke or not, whatever. But Brand says something like, well, David, what you really mean when you say reptiles is now, Brand is not intelligent enough to actually know this thing, so he's reading a script, is allegories about, human, psychology, and he was talking about archetypes, basically, which is actually what is the truth of it, right? Which is, that's the truth of it. That's why we have gargoyles in churches, not because those things actually existed, but because they're sort of like, realized material manifested archetypes of negative human emotions, such as power, desire, want. They are the 7 deadly sins in many ways, and ugly behaviors and feelings about ourselves. And that's a healthy thing, because the shadow is what you need to purge. Now, this brings me to another thing with the spirituality thing. You cannot go on a consciousness revolution if you have not done your own shadow work. You just can't. And you can't do it if someone else is doing it for you. You can't. You can't have another person doing their shadow work, giving up drugs or whatever he wants, asking for a socialist egalitarian republic while he buys a $2.5 million house. You can't do that. Only you can take that spiritual journey on your own. And let me tell you something, Russell Brand fans. So listen to this one. The fact that you are depending on Russell Brand to do your salvation for you, your political salvation and your spiritual salvation, is your shadow. Let that one sink in for a second. Your shadow is your dependency on him to be your Messiah. And that's why the tour is called the Messiah Complex. It's not him that has the Messiah Complex. It's you. You have the Messiah Complex. You're the one who needs a Messiah. You're the one who needs a salvation. You're the one who needs a Redeemer. And that's your shadow. And the fact that you're still following a guy and you're doing this and believing that his salvation is going to lead to everyone's salvation shows that you haven't done your own shadow work and you're still dependent on the external, outside factor. You do not get to salvation in a collective. You do not save your ass with anyone else's help, really, at the end of the day. Even when you were born, the last time you had that help was when you were born and you forced you out. And after that, you were on your own. And that includes everything. Yes, we all have friends. Yes, we all have people we relate to. Yes, we all have someone we love and people we love. And that's all perfectly beautiful. But when it comes down to the real stuff, the actual salvation of your soul, whatever that is, or the expansion of your consciousness, no one is ever going to take you there. And that's your Messiah complex, if you truly believe that Russell Brand is bringing you on a spirituality expansion of consciousness and a revolution. Because you know something? The revolution of spirituality is true. Those like silly New Age fans of his that put those memes up there, Russell Brand's spiritual revolution, yeah, you're looking at Russell Brand and it just revolves right back to you, no matter how much faith you put in them. And this is also, I'm very upset about the entheogen thing. Now, I've done psilocybin, I've done entheogens, I've done lots of drugs, I've had the shamanic experiences, and some of the greatest experiences of my life. But they didn't expand me spiritually. What they did was they helped me see things in the same way dreams do. And they were fantastic for creativity. There's far too much of a push at the moment to push this entheogen stuff as a solution. So we have on one side the political panacea, a social egalitarian Fabian mandate, where people say Russell Brand for Prime Minister, and on the other side, a spiritual, psychedelic detour away from your spirituality. Because you don't need these substances. And it's becoming very, very sinister to me. Let's talk about when this happened before, okay? I know for a fact that they flooded the world with ecstasy, knowing it would burn out the serotonin in people's brains. I knew it. They deliberately did that. And so many of the people in their 40s and so on now, who are late 30s and 40s, who are on SSRIs, came from that E-generation. And the raves and the happy bundies and all that stuff, they took an awful lot of V, which was at the time, was a lovely drug. It made you real happy and feel really good and bonded with your friends, and it was a nice experience. But it wasn't the solution. That love that happened and those bonding of emotions that happened while you were on ecstasy was frying, dissolving, and burning the shit out of your serotonin. And I fear the same thing could happen with synthesized or bogus psychedelics. It could destroy people's DMT completely or damage their ability to process it. Remember, DMT is still a mysterious compound. You have all this thing about, it seems to be in the pineal gland, but we don't know for sure. And then they come up with a book called The Spirit Molecule, which is by Rick Strassman, which is put out there almost like a scientific text. And then we have Dr. Timothy Leary saying that, tune in, turn out, burn out, whatever it was. And then it's been, he was a CIA agent. And again, we're always given these panaceas, spiritual and everything. And at the end, you're going to end up with none of them. Look what happened to the 60s generation. Did the revolution happen? No, they all ended up in cocaine in the 70s, and they were all getting things like herpes and AIDS by the 80s. It wasn't good. It wasn't a revolution. It was a degradation. And that's because the people who run this world don't particularly like human beings. That London School of Economics story from 2006 that I just read to you shows that how much they despise us. They see us and they classify us as goblins. That's what they see you as, a goblin that must be taken out. And those of you who are fit to live, as George Bernard Shaw said, that justify your existence, they must have their sympathy, compassion, love, and feelings removed so they can wipe out you goblins. And you see that all the time. You see, like, do you ever watch shows like Little Britain, right? And Vicky Pollard, right? You have these upper middle class tits. And that show, Little Britain, is not funny. It may have been funny for the first 2 weeks, but then they just recycle the whole thing. But that Little Britain show is ravaged with classism. Bunch of upper middle class tops making fun of the poor. That's all that is. That's all that is. And Vicky Pollard is just an object of hate. Hate the Shavs. Hate the Skangers. Hate the Pikeys. Hate the ones who are not like tall and noble and coffee-skinned and androgynous. They have sketches saying, there was one I always thought was very revealing where the social worker says to Vicky Pollard, what happened to your child? And she goes, I swapped it for a Westlife CD. And she goes, oh my God, I can't believe you swapped your child for a Westlife CD. And Vicky Pollard replies, I know, they're rubbish. And it seems funny at the time and it's a good joke, but you realize that, here they are developing behavioral models for you to fit into. So you become a Vicky Pollard. You become a vicious social worker who doesn't care about people. You become a yuppie parent who goes on holidays and leaves your kids without a babysitter. You become what they tell you to become because you are a programmed specimen in a laboratory called Western society, run by mad scientists. Mad scientists under the employment of groups like Tavistock, Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg, London School of Economics, but they're all ultimately running the same agenda. They just do it in a localized cultural way. The same general idea. You are a lap rat, and they look at you and they say, hey, what if we give them a third gender. Let's see how they react. And then let's try and change it by making it look like a great thing. I don't care if they're just people. I know there's people out there who are born the wrong gender and have to be changed. That's okay. But instead, they don't do that. What they're doing is creating a one-size-fits-all gender that fits in the middle. If you don't know what you are, you just become the third gender. You don't go on a spiritual or personal or psychological exploration. You just become the third gender. And they watch us and they quantify us and they measure us. And then they say, oh, they're very angry at the moment. They seem to be having a big problem with the BBC and all the Jimmy Savile stuff. And they're saying things like, we better not pay our license fee. Because remember, in sorcery, the exchange of the coin, the exchange of money, you have to give that money over. You have to acquiesce that power. You have to give the change for change in the form of the license fee. And people are saying, not that bloody license fee anymore. No way. Not that Jimmy Savile stuff and all the other pedos in there and how they protected them. And they know this, and then they think about it and says, well, we have to bring the BBC on the road to Damascus. We have to bring BBC on the road to salvation. So the scientists sit down and they say, well, we'll get Paxman and Russell Brand to perform like two Punch and Judy puppets for the people. One side will go, oh, I don't like that Russell Brand. He's like he's a dirty old bastard or something like that, right? And the other side will go, I really like Russ. He's great. And then someone else will say, like that Jerry Paxman. He's a great man. He talks to a nice public school accent. And all the factions are all looking at this in a different way. And then they'll watch the internet. They'll monitor your tweets. They'll look at your Facebook pages, and they'll run experiments. They'll run the logarithms that they plan to say, see, X amount will get onto this Facebook page. And then you might have a protest. So we'll have maybe Russell Brand will probably put his own version of the Bilderberg Festival, Fringe Festival next year. Maybe they'll have this next summer. And it'll be some kind of festival. And they'll have all the Cambridge scientists and spook activists and groups like this SWP and the Cambridge Occupy and the Cambridge Truth Group, which is just basically a go-between between the science departments and the economic departments in Cambridge universities and the activist community. And they're looking at you. They're looking at you. They're quantifying you, the lab rat. They're like checking you out and seeing how you work. And they put it all together. And then they test and they formulate. But ultimately, they're going to try and find out who's going to be the goblin, like in that guy's story, that Professor Curry's story, the evolutionary biologist, or theorist, sorry. And who's going to be the tall, coffee-skinned people? And they know how to play in the archetypes. So my prediction will be they're going to try and really, really push the entheogens, the psychedelics. They're really going to try and push that as your spirit, your new church, the Church of DMT. That's been a long time coming. I think they're really going to put in the Church of Psilocybin. They're going to really push things like transcendental meditation to get you transformed into transformation, to trance you into formation. That's going to be a big one. In fact, I believe Russell Brand's money is going to that from this Messiah complex tour. And they're going to create a third party in the UK, which will be a new socialist party, which will probably go into a coalition. They'll create a British version of Ron Paul. He'll be seen as the one who's not like, I'm not a scumbag like the rest of them, like the Tories and New Labour. I'm nobody can own me. And it'll probably be some like business person or some celebrity that'll be used. I won't be Russell Brand, no way. But there'll be some other person that they'll use to do that. But all the time, it's just moving you towards this. So don't be surprised if some kind of big festival is planned this summer, with Charlie Skelton and the Cambridge Guardian crowd. And Russell Brand is the main one behind it. And it'll be like this, it'll be called like some kind of, oh man, we're going to see Russell Brand and it's going to be all transformation of consciousness. But remember, my friends, when you're standing there going, Russ speaks for me, and I got news for you. It's the exact same thing when you say Thomas Sheridan speaks for me. You can agree with me, that's okay. But don't get in the thing that I'm the one doing it for you. You still have to do it for yourself. You haven't worked on your shadow. And the first shadow you have to work on is the one that gives you a Messiah complex. The one that makes you submit to authority. The one that makes you go, down to government buildings and saying, please, I'm protesting, when you're really saying, please, Mr. Government Man, do what I want to do. Please give me some crumbs from your table. I'm waving my flag. I'm banging my drums. I might even throw a few bricks. But please, will you give me what you want? And that's a shadow too, that you exercise that shadow through apathy. You say, screw the government. I'm not going to go there anymore. I'm not going to stand down by. I'm not going to indulge their own messiah complex by making them feel powerful by demanding or rioting or protesting. I'm not going to do that anymore. What we need is a strategic. Here we go. Before we get to the next song, what we really need is, and this is an individual thing, is a strategic withdrawal from mind control bullshit. A strategic withdrawal from mind control bullshit. Pull yourself back. Say, I'm not going to impulsively share this BBC video. I'm not going to impulsively share this meme. I'm not going to impulsively join some Russell Brand for Prime Minister website that's been set up by the Fabians of the Socialist Workers' Party. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think about it. I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to think, well, what's in it for me? Personally in my life, what's in it for me right now? Does it pay my gas bill? Does it give me long-term happiness? Does it get my wife to have sex with me again because she doesn't fancy me anymore because I'm talking about, 9/11? And she doesn't believe that stuff. Sit back and think. They don't want you being wise. They don't want you thinking. They don't want you being, as this next Thin Lizzy song, they don't want you to be a renegade of your own consciousness. And this is Renegade by Thin Lizzy.